Common came to Los Angeles for a Sprite commercial and almost left in an ambulance. He wasn't beefing with Mack 10 directly. One of his crew members had stared Mack 10 down on set, said the wrong thing, and by the time Fat Joe had physically stepped between them and talked the situation down, Mack 10's people had already gone to the car to retrieve a weapon. That is the detail that tells you everything. Not that a stare down happened, not that words were exchanged, not even that a fight broke out. It's that within minutes of a sideways look from someone in Common's entourage, Mack 10 had people going to retrieve a firearm in the parking lot. His friend had to save Common's life. Those are Fat Joe's words, not an embellishment. This is what made Mack 10 different from most rappers who came out of Los Angeles in the 1990s. There were a lot of hard men in that industry at that time. The West Coast had Suge Knight and the death row situation. There was genuine gang activity woven through the fabric of the music scene. But even within that context, Mack 10 occupied a specific position. People were actually scared of him, not of his music, of him personally. And understanding why requires going back to where he started and what that place made him. Dedrick Damon Rollison was born on August 9, 1971 in Inglewood, California, and grew up on Queen Street, a block in Inglewood that has long been associated with the Queen Street Bloods. He would later take his stage name from the Mack 10 submachine gun, a choice that was not arbitrary. It reflected a specific aesthetic and a specific identity, someone who came from a world where that kind of reference carried real weight. Inglewood in the late 1970s and 1980s was not the same Inglewood that exists today. It was a city in the middle of a decade-long spiral driven by the crack epidemic, gang expansion, and the kind of institutional neglect that left entire communities to sort themselves out with whatever internal structures they could build. The crack economy transformed South Los Angeles in ways that were simultaneously economic and social. Money that had never existed in those neighborhoods started flowing through them, and alongside the money came violence, and alongside the violence came a reorganization of every social relationship around who had power and who didn't. The Queen Street Bloods were one of the structures that gave that environment its shape. You didn't necessarily need to make a conscious choice to be involved when you lived on Queen Street. The block made the choice for you by virtue of geography and proximity, and Mack 10 has said this himself in interviews, that being from there meant being involved at some level, whether you went looking for it or not. What this environment produced was not just street toughness, but a specific kind of calibration. Mack 10 grew up around men for whom violence was a practical tool rather than a theatrical one. The difference between someone who has been around real violence all his life and someone performing toughness for an audience is something that other people in that world can feel almost immediately. It reads differently. Mack 10 read differently. He didn't start with music. Like a lot of kids who came up in the 1980s in athletic neighborhoods, he had aspirations toward the NFL at one point, a legitimate way out that the streets of Los Angeles had actually produced for some people. That path closed the way it closes for most people who want it, and his attention shifted. By the time he was in junior high school, music had started pulling him in, largely because people in his immediate neighborhood were already doing it, and hip-hop was becoming the medium through which the specific experience of growing up in South Los Angeles was being documented for the rest of the world. He joined a local rap group called First Amendment, began developing as a writer, and started sharpening his ability to translate the texture of what he saw around him into language that worked over a beat. He wasn't famous yet. He was just getting better, and the people around him were starting to notice. There is a quality in people who learn to rap the way Mack 10 learned, not in classrooms or workshops, but in neighborhoods where the music had to be honest or it didn't land. that is very difficult to acquire after the facts. The specificity comes from the lived experience, and the lived experience cannot be borrowed. Mack 10 had it from the beginning because he had no other option. The chain of connections that took Mack 10 from Queen Street to Priority Records to Westside Connection was not a single break, but a series of industry doors that opened one at a time, each one contingent on the one before it. The first significant connection was with Eazy-E, the co-founder of NWA, who had already demonstrated that music coming directly out of Los Angeles gang culture could reach a national and eventually global audience. Mack met Eazy before he met anyone else of significance in the industry. He wrote records for him. Eazy saw what was there and made introductions. Those introductions led to people like DJ Bobcat and DJ Pooh, producers and DJs who were embedded in the Los Angeles industry infrastructure at a time when that infrastructure was producing some of the most commercially and culturally significant rap music in American history. The specific value of those connections was not just access, it was context. Being in rooms with people who were already operating at a professional level taught Mack 10 how that world worked before he was formally part of it. It is also worth noting what an Eazy-E cosign meant specifically in 1993 and 1994. NWA had already reshaped the entire commercial landscape of hip-hop. Eazy had built Ruthless Records into one of the most influential independent labels in the country. His eye for talent was not a casual thing. When he saw enough in Mack 10 to sit down and write with him and make introductions on his behalf, that was a meaningful signal that traveled through the industry. People paid attention to who Eazy vouched for, and Eazy was vouching for Mack 10 at exactly the right moment. Through those connections, Mack 10 eventually found his way into the same circle as the Lynch Mob, the crew that Ice Cube had built around himself after leaving NWA. Meeting Cube was the pivotal moment. They hit it off immediately, the chemistry between them was real, and Mack 10 went on tour with the Lynch Mob, which gave him both exposure and the time to build a genuine relationship with Cube rather than just a professional transaction. This distinction matters. Mack 10's loyalty to Ice Cube during the Common and Cypress Hill situations was not the loyalty of a business partner protecting an investment. It was the loyalty of someone who has spent real time with the person and built something that felt like friendship. That kind of loyalty behaves differently under pressure. That relationship was the foundation for everything that followed. In 1994, Mack 10 made his first appearance on a major release through Ice Cube's Bootlegs and B-Sides compilation on a remix of the track What Can I Do? That same year, he appeared on the Friday soundtrack, which Cube was curating and which became one of the more significant pop cultural artifacts of the mid-1990s. And when his debut album came out on Priority Records in 1995, Ice Cube was producing and contributing verses, giving Mack 10 an immediate credibility boost that no amount of money could have purchased. The self-titled debut album performed well, going gold and producing Faux Life as the breakthrough single, a track that became an anthem for the West Coast in a moment when the East Coast-West Coast dynamic was at its most charged. The album's hit Westside Slaughterhouse, featuring Cube and WC, was the first time all three of them appeared on a track together, and the foundation from which Westside Connection as an actual group would eventually grow. When Westside Connection officially formed in 1996, it was not simply a business arrangement between three rappers who had worked well together. It was a statement about geography and identity at a moment when the geography and identity of West Coast hip-hop were under active, ongoing pressure from an East Coast that had taken the commercial dominance of the mid-1990s West as a provocation. The East Coast-West Coast tension that defined the mid-1990s rap industry was not entirely manufactured by the media, though the media amplified it considerably. It was real, rooted in genuine competitive animosity and aesthetic disagreement about what rap should sound like and who it should center. Westside Connection was in that context as much a political statement as a musical one. Their debut album, Bow Down, debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200. The title track was exactly what it said it was, a declaration directed at anyone who doubted that Los Angeles remained the center of the rap universe, regardless of what was happening in New York or anywhere else. It was aggressive, it was confrontational, and it was also extremely good, which made it very difficult for anyone to dismiss. Mack 10's specific contribution to Westside Connection was the energy he brought to the corner of the group that was most explicitly about street reality. Ice Cube was the intellectual architect, the one with the NWA history and the political consciousness and the film career. WC brought a different kind of lyrical precision. Mack 10 brought the Queen Street in him, the flat, matter-of-fact delivery of someone describing a world he had not left behind and was not performing distance from. When Mack 10 rapped about the streets of Inglewood, there was nothing in his voice that suggested he was narrating from a safe remove. He sounded like a man who had gone home the night before. The chemistry between the three of them was genuine, and it made the music work in a way that supergroups frequently fail to achieve. The individual parts complemented each other rather than competing for the same sonic space. Westside Connection sold records and shaped the conversation about what West Coast rap was and could be during a period when that conversation was being conducted at an unusually high volume. Bow Down went platinum. The follow-up, Terrorist Threats, released in 2003 after a 7-year gap, went gold and produced the single Gangsta Nation, demonstrating that the appetite for what these three made together had persisted through years of absence. The commercial record of the group is, in retrospect, one of the more impressive of the supergroup era in hip-hop, built on a foundation that was creative rather than merely transactional. The beef with Common began not with Mack 10 directly, but with Ice Cube, and it began with a song called I Used to Love H.E.R., which Common released on his 1994 album Resurrection. The song was a metaphor, and it was a well-constructed one. It used the device of a deteriorating relationship to describe Common's feeling that hip-hop had been transformed from its pure early form into something more commercialized and genre-constricted. The movement of the girl in the song from the suburbs to the West Coast, from thoughtful and conscious to harder and more materialistic, was a direct narrative reference to how gangsta rap and West Coast rap specifically had reshaped what mainstream hip-hop looked like and sounded like through the early 1990s. Common later acknowledged that he could see why people heard it the way they heard it, but he also maintained that the song was about a broader observation about the evolution of the genre rather than a direct attack on any single artist or region. Ice Cube heard it as a shot at the West Coast specifically, and he responded on Westside Slaughterhouse, the track that featured Mack 10 and WC on the debut album. The response was pointed and left no room for ambiguity about where Cube stood. Common fired back, recording a diss track that went directly at Ice Cube with pointed lines about his artistic history and perceived contradictions. The exchange produced some genuinely sharp hip-hop, the kind of lyricism-forward battle rap that reminded people what the form was capable of when both sides were actually trying to hurt each other with words rather than just posturing. But it also created unresolved tension that didn't fully dissipate when the two sides officially reconciled at the Nation of Islam peace summit organized by Minister Farrakhan in April 1997 in the fraught months following the deaths of Tupac Shakur and the notorious B.I.G. The summit brought together major figures from both sides of the East Coast-West Coast divide, and the Ice Cube Common Reconciliation was one of its visible outcomes. It was real as far as it went. What didn't happen was the complete resolution of every grievance at every level of both camps. When Common and Mack 10 ended up on the same set filming that Sprite commercial along with Fat Joe, Goody Mob, and CeeLo Green, one of Common's associates was still carrying the temperature of the earlier beef. He made it known by staring Mack 10 down on set, a gesture that in that specific world carried a very specific meaning. Mack 10's response was immediate and unambiguous. He confronted the man directly. Words were exchanged. And then, according to multiple accounts of what happened, Mack 10's associate went to the car to retrieve a firearm. Fat Joe stepped in physically as a mediator and managed to bring the temperature down enough to prevent things from going further. Common's associate was removed from the set. He came back and reportedly broke windows on Mack 10's car. He was then roughed up, and Fat Joe once again intervened to prevent the situation from escalating further. Common later acknowledged that Fat Joe had effectively saved his life by preventing the situation from reaching its logical conclusion. The phrase he used was direct. Fat Joe saved my life. That sentence tells you everything about Mack 10's reputation that needs to be said. This was not a random confrontation between two strangers at a party. This was a controlled, professional environment, a commercial shoot with major brands and significant money involved. And within minutes of a sideways look from someone in Common's crew, the situation had reached the point where Common needed someone to save his life. That is not performance. That is a man who brought the same thing to every environment he walked into. The beef with Cypress Hill came out of a different kind of grievance and involved Mack 10 in a different role, not as the principal target, but as a loyal soldier riding with his man regardless of the personal costs. Cypress Hill's Be Real had a legitimate complaint. The group had contributed a track to the Friday soundtrack at Ice Cube's invitation, but during a studio session where they played Cube their upcoming album Temples of Boom, Cube had fallen in love with the lead single Throw Your Set in the Air and asked if he could use it for the soundtrack instead. Cypress Hill declined. When the Friday soundtrack came out, a song on it bore a chorus closely resembling the one they had said no to. Be Real heard it from a friend first, then listened for himself and concluded that Cube had used their hook without permission. The situation was compounded during a subsequent studio session where Be Real heard lines in a different song that matched his own lyrics from Temples of Boom. He noted that when he stepped out of the room briefly, the lines disappeared from the track when he returned, which he took as confirmation that Cube had been caught a second time. Cypress Hill responded with the diss track, No Rest for the Wicked. Ice Cube retaliated with King of the Hill, and he brought Mack 10 into it. Mack 10's role here is revealing for a different reason than the Common incident. Cypress Hill was blood affiliated, so was Mack 10. Under a different set of personal priorities, the blood connection might have made Mack 10 hesitate before jumping into a beef against them. It didn't. His loyalty to Cube came before his affiliation with the color. He has said this plainly in interviews. He had never met anyone from Cypress Hill personally. They could be blood. He didn't care. Cube was his man, and he was riding. That is the code he operated by, and it is consistent with the same code that governed every other situation in his career where loyalty was put to a test. The beef eventually came down through an unlikely channel. Mack 10 himself got Be Real on the phone, explained his position, and the two actually had a productive conversation. Mack 10 told Be Real that riding with Cube was about loyalty, not about the specifics of the dispute, and Be Real said he could respect that. It was a remarkably honest exchange between two men from street backgrounds who both understood what loyalty actually required and what it cost. Mack 10 then facilitated a conversation between Cube and Be Real that led to the beef being officially squashed. The arc of Mack 10's involvement in the Cypress Hill situation illustrates something important about how he actually operated. He could escalate a conflict quickly, and he could also, when the moment called for it, be the person who built the bridge back down. The man who had gone to the car for a weapon at the Sprite commercial was also the man who called Be Real, talked it through honestly, and helped end a beef that had the potential to stay ugly for years. That combination, the genuine willingness to go to a very dark place when pushed, alongside the ability to be genuinely reasonable when it served a purpose, is what made him difficult to categorize and difficult to handle. The most painful and lasting beef in Mack 10's story was the one that ended Westside Connection and hasn't been fully resolved: his falling out with Ice Cube. The specific trigger, by Mack 10's account, was Ice Cube's brother-in-law. Mack 10 has said in multiple interviews over the years that the brother-in-law had been persistently disrespectful and that he brought the issue to Cube directly multiple times, asking Cube to intervene and resolve it before it became a physical situation. Mack has put the number at 4 or 5 separate conversations with Cube before things escalated. He frames those conversations as his attempt to handle things the right way, to exhaust the diplomatic option before anything else happened. This framing is consistent with how Mack has always presented himself. Not as someone who goes looking for conflict, but as someone who does not back away from it once it finds him, and who considers 5 conversations more than sufficient before concluding that the diplomatic route is exhausted. Eventually, the brother-in-law got beaten up. That was the line from which Cube and Mack 10's relationship could not recover. Cube has confirmed in interviews that there is a problem between them, describing it as a violation he cannot overlook, without specifying the details. Mack 10's version is that the violation was something Cube's brother-in-law committed against him, not the other way around, and that he spent weeks trying to resolve it peacefully before it came to a head. The two versions of the story exist in public, side by side, unreconciled, and neither man has shown any particular urgency to resolve the contradiction. Mack 10 has also suggested in interviews that part of the tension involved Ice Cube declining to go on a second promotional tour for Terrorist Threats, Westside Connection's 2003 album, which Mack felt shortchanged the project commercially. Whether that grievance preceded the physical incident or compounded it is something neither party has been fully transparent about. What makes the fallout particularly significant is what it cost both of them commercially and artistically. Westside Connection's second album, Terrorist Threats, came out in 2003 and went gold, suggesting the audience for what the three of them made together was still very much present. The falling out between Mack and Cube effectively ended the possibility of any further Westside Connection music at the exact moment when the foundation for a sustained reunion had been established. Bow Down had shown they could sell. Terrorist Threats had shown the audience hadn't gone anywhere. The third chapter never came. Mack 10 has expressed regret about the outcome without expressing regret about his actions. In a 2023 interview with Bootleg Kev, he was measured, not bitter, not pushing for reconciliation, not holding a visible grudge, but also clear that the wound is still there and that he is not the one who needs to reach out first. Ice Cube, for his part, performs with WC as the remaining 2/3 of Westside Connection when the occasion arises, and has been consistent in referring to an unspecified violation as the reason Mack 10 is not part of that picture. By the time you total it all up, Mack 10's career produced nearly 11 million records sold between his solo work and Westside Connection, 4 gold solo certifications, and a commercial peak that placed him at the center of the most significant period in West Coast rap history. His debut album went gold. Based on a True Story went gold. The Recipe went gold. Bow Down with Westside Connection went platinum and hit number 2 on the Billboard 200. He founded Who Bangin' Records and built it into a functional independent operation, developing and releasing artists through his own infrastructure at a time when doing so without major label backing required both resources and genuine industry knowledge. He married T-Boz from TLC in August 2000 and has remained dedicated to his daughter Chase from that relationship even after the divorce in 2004. What his legacy in hip-hop comes down to is a specific quality that the best West Coast rap from the 1990s had, and that has been very difficult for subsequent generations to replicate. The quality of actually sounding like you came from the place you're rapping about without any visible seam between the art and the life. Mack 10 did not sound like he was performing Inglewood. He sounded like a man from Inglewood who had found a way to turn that into music. The rawness was not an aesthetic choice. It was just what he was, put into a microphone. There is also something worth noting about how Mack 10 has aged as a public figure, because it reflects the same consistency that defined him at his peak. He does not chase reconciliation with Ice Cube publicly. He does not harbor visible bitterness about it either. He shows up at events in Inglewood, does toy drives, performs when the opportunity comes, and gives interviews that are candid without being inflammatory. The person he is in public in his 50s is recognizably the same person who was on that Sprite commercial set in the late 1990s. Direct, calm, carrying everything he carries without making a performance of carrying it. The difference is that nobody is going to the car for anything anymore. The industry beefs, the Sprite commercial near disaster, the Cypress Hill situation he helped resolve, and the ultimately irreconcilable falling out with the man who gave him his biggest break, all of it was played out in the open and with the same flat, direct energy that defined his music. He did not manage his image from a safe distance. He lived it. And the people who crossed him generally came away with the story about needing someone else to step in and save them from the consequences. That is the kind of reputation that doesn't get built in a studio. It gets built in the places you come from and the way you carry those places everywhere you go afterward. Mack 10 never stopped carrying Queen Street, and Queen Street, in the end, was what made him exactly what he was. One of the most respected and most genuinely feared figures to ever step into the West Coast rap game at a time when the West Coast rap game was as dangerous as anything the music industry has ever produced.